This is a story that has outraged people for over 30 years. On May the 5th, 1993, three 8-year-old best friends were reported missing in West Memphis, Arkansas. Eventually, their bodies were found in what police could only describe as a brutal, satanic, ritualistic killing. Eventually, 3 teenage boys were subsequently arrested and found guilty of their murders. Each one of those boys was sentenced to life in prison, with one of those boys being sentenced to death. But get this, out of the full 12-hour interrogation, there only exists 43 minutes of footage. And that is because the rest of the time, they were basically coaching a confession out of him that lined up with exactly what they believed already happened. The state of Arkansas refused flat out to acknowledge any wrongdoing in this case whatsoever. And because of that refusal, it meant that the real killer was still out there. And so one of the people who this really strikes is producer Peter Jackson. He's outraged and he decides that he's going to do his own investigation. And Adam, very quickly, a lot of the light lands firmly on him.
Wow. How can you get away with murder like that?
Welcome to The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm Kyle Risi, your ringmaster for this week's episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, the midwife for this week. The animals need a midwife.
Yeah, who do you report to?
Just myself. But we've got a lot of animals.
Yeah, they're all fornicating.
Yeah, well, they get a bit amorous every now and again.
Amorous, what a great word.
And of course, they have kids. And so I'm there to deliver. I'm not a vet because I don't know anything serious.
Okay.
But I can help deliver animal babies.
And of course, with the surplus of budget that we absolutely have the resources to raise and take care of all these babies. It's not like to the dumpster, off you go, bin day.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was a creche a while back. I managed the creche.
Okay, so you're midwife and you're managing the creche of all the animals. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. KPIs?
Don't
Kill the babies!
That's pretty much it.
Good. Put a pin in that for your performance review. Guys, if you are new to the show and you want to support us, then of course the absolute best way to support the show and enjoy exclusive perks is to join us over at Patreon, because signing up is free and you will get access to next week's episode a whole 7 days before anyone else.
And for as little as $5 a month, you can become a fellow freak of the show, which will unlock our entire back catalogue, including all of our classic episodes that you can have a listen into.
Yeah, and if you need a real good reason to sign up, remember, certified freaks and big top tier members get our exclusive compendium keychain so that we can always be there, dangling
near your crotch, everywhere you go.
Yeah, let the silence just speak for itself for a second. Let's just think about that. Think about it.
I can hear the sound of the keychain like
dangling in the wind. Yeah,
like wind chimes.
Hitting against your inner thigh.
And lastly, guys, please follow us on your favorite app and leave us a review. Your support helps others find us and keeps these amazing stories coming.
Please, if you haven't left us a review, just leave us a review either on our website or on Apple, on Spotify, and give us a rating. But really, give us the reviews.
And I guess that's enough of today's housekeeping.
It is, because Adam, today on the Compendium, we are diving in to an assembly of fear that demanded a monster and a system that was willing to manufacture it.
This is, cryptic, but also sounds kind of scary.
It is quite scary on a societal level. Adam, today we are diving into a story that has haunted, but also outraged people for over 30 years. On May the 5th, 1993, Stevie Branch, Chris Byers, and Michael Moore, three 8-year-old best friends, were reported missing in West Memphis, Arkansas. Eventually, their bodies were found in what police could only describe as a brutal, satanic, ritualistic killing.
Wow.
With very little evidence, the police investigation eventually pinpointed 3 teenage boys who were subsequently arrested and found guilty of their murders. Each one of those boys was sentenced to life in prison, with one of those boys being sentenced to death via lethal injection as his part as the cult ringleader.
How old were these boys?
17, 18, 19.
Okay, so they are adults.
Yes.
Some of them are now, I
correct.
guess.
But the truth was, Adam, they were completely innocent. It was a fact that the world realized very, very quickly. And it is down to the series of haunting documentaries that came out while the trial was going on and in subsequent years while they were battling to be released from prison, where these documentaries re-examined the evidence. But for 18 years, Adam, the calls for the case be reopened just led nowhere. The state of Arkansas refused flat out to acknowledge any wrongdoing in this case whatsoever, which for me is the most haunting aspect of the story, because it meant that the real killers were still out there. And Adam, when I say Arkansas were refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing, they understood de facto that these boys were innocent. And because of that refusal, it meant that this killer was still out there.
Why did they refuse that then? They didn't want to seem like they got it wrong?
Reputational damage. Put it that way. So today, Adam, I'm going to tell you about the Robin Hood murders and the West Memphis Three, the boys who were wrongly convicted of their murders. Have you heard of this story before?
I don't think I have. I've heard of the West Memphis Three. I think that's one of our top topics that people have recommended that we do a story on, but I don't think I really knew what it was about.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This, by far, is one of the most highly suggested episodes. And Adam, it's a tricky one because I've kind of neglected doing this story. It is deeply complicated, riddled with literally tons of twists and turns. And it's the reason why it's so difficult to tell the story in a single episode, because all the other podcasts out there, there's always 4 parts, 5 parts, 6 parts. And I promised myself that I wouldn't be doing this episode unless I could work out a way of doing it in a single episode. And that's what we're going to be doing today.
So before people write in, you missed out this, then the other.
Exactly. It's going to be fairly focused. But I will tell you a little bit about some of the offshoots and the side stories that are happening in this. Mm-hmm. But to sum up today, I'm going to be telling you about the murders themselves, how this led to the conviction of the West Memphis Three, which takes us into the cultural backdrop of, believe it or not, the Satanic Panic that was gripping America around about this time.
That was back in the 80s, right?
That's right, yeah. And this was 1993. So the Satanic Panic left a really long shadow that really affected society even 10 years later. Mm-hmm. It's a factor that will help us explain what drove a jury to find these boys guilty in spite of there being very, very little evidence. We'll also look at the fight for justice that was led by a world-famous producer who set out to re-examine the evidence, speaking to witnesses who were initially discounted by the police at the time. This is a story, Adam, of a gross miscarriage of justice that was driven purely by fear.
Wow, yeah, I'm really intrigued to find out what happened here because I literally have no idea. So this feels like a good introduction to the story. And then obviously, if you want to dig into the little details, then go off.
Yeah, and it is a really interesting one because it does involve satanic ritual cults and murders and things like that, which is not something that we hear very often. It does seem to be something that's very focused on a very specific period of time in American history. But it was a real big fear for millions of people across America during this period of time. But I do have to say, before we dive into today's story, this episode does come with a trigger warning because we will, of course, be talking about the murders of 3 very young boys, including mentions of their injuries as well as sexual assault.
Oh, my word.
So if this is something maybe that you would rather skip, we totally understand. Or if you've got young kids at home listening with you, maybe it's best to kind of pop your headphones in.
Yeah, put on some Bluey.
Put on some Bluey, yeah. Adam, the story of the West Memphis Three starts with the murders of best friends Stevie Branch, Chris Byers, and Michael Moore, who collectively became known as the Robin Hood murders. All 3 of them were second graders at Weaver Elementary in West Memphis, and by all accounts, they were best friends. Stevie Branch was born in November of 1984, and he is an awesome little kid. He is described as looking like Bart Simpson on account of his blonde spiky hair. Mm-hmm. But unlike Bart Simpson, Stevie is incredibly friendly. He's incredibly affectionate. He lives with his younger half-sister Amanda, his mum Pam, and their stepfather Terry Hobbs. Chris Byers was born in June of 1984. He lives with his mum Melissa and his stepfather Mark Byers. And at the time, Chris is really struggling with hyperactivity disorder. And his parents were actually in the process of desperately trying to find him the right medication, especially since this was now starting to affect his behavior at school. But other than this, Chris was bright. He was a playful little kid who, by all accounts, was from a poor but a very happy household. The final friend in our little trio is Michael Moore, born in July 1984. His parents were Dana and Todd Moore. And out of the three, Michael is the leader. The others definitely followed his lead wherever he would go. They were all in the Cubs together and had just made it as Wolf Scouts. Were you in the Scouts?
I wasn't in the Scouts, no.
Oh, you never had a rite of passage.
Well, I had other rites of passages.
Creepy scout leaders, standing too close, smelling their coffee breath.
Never had that, but yeah, it sounds like these are just regular kids, little boys, 8 or 9 years old when they're killed. That is awful.
It is awful. And they live in West Memphis in Arkansas. They are from a poor neighborhood. They make do with the very little that they've got. And so a lot of their adventures stem from just playing outside as kids in the late 80s and early 90s did. You know, that was their world. And for Michael, being a Wolf Scout is something he's very proud of. He's often seen kind of wearing parts of his uniform when they're out playing, and his favorite game to play was pretending to be a police officer. So it gives you a sense of the type of little boy that he was as well, and what he might even eventually grow up to be.
Yeah.
And as a trio, the three of them, they are inseparable. At the time, it was early May. Summer was just around the corner, and they, as a trio, had big plans for exploring the town. But on May the 5th, 1993, Stevie's mum, Pam, went to go pick Stevie up from school. She says that she remembers this day vividly because she says Stevie was being unusually affectionate, constantly stopping on the way home to tell her that he loved her.
Oh.
It's just such a touching detail.
Yeah.
But also she must hold that really sacredly as well, knowing that the day that her son disappeared, at least they got to tell each other that they loved each other.
That's something, I guess, yeah.
Around 3 p.m., there is a knock at Stevie's door, and it's Michael. He's looking for Stevie because he wants to go out and play. The weather had been really terrible the last few days. The sun had finally come out, and Michael is desperate to show Stevie his brand new bike. Stevie, of course, he begs Pam to let him go. It is a firm no. She's rushing to get dinner ready before Terry got home, and then she had to head out to work at the local chicken restaurant that she worked at. Stevie, of course, he doesn't let up, and now Michael is chiming in too, and they're begging, please, just let us go.
Yeah.
Eventually, Pam just gives in, but she is firm at him. She's like, you have to be back at 4:30 for dinner, and so I can get ready to go to work. And so off he goes. 30 minutes later, at 3:30 p.m., there is another knock at the door. This time it's Chris. He's looking for Stevie as well. Pam, of course, tells him that he was out with Michael and that he would be back at 4:30. So Chris decides to stay. He watches cartoons with Amanda for a little bit. They watch like Muppet Babies.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that show?
I remember Muppet Babies, yeah.
That lasts for like 30 minutes. Chris is like, I'm not waiting till 4:30.
Yeah, I'm bored.
So Chris goes out to try and find them. Unfortunately, he doesn't find them because before he does, Chris's father, Mark Byers, spots him skateboarding down North 14th Street on his belly.
Okay.
So, got a vivid...
I remember doing that.
Yeah. Chris is in big trouble, though, because he went out playing before he'd finished all of his chores. So Mark drags him home. He gives him a little spanking, and he's ordered to finish up cleaning the carport or something. So around this time, Mark also leaves to go pick up Chris's older brother from the courthouse where he was testifying as a witness in a car wreck or something. But at 4:45 p.m., we're now back at Stevie's house. He's still not back. And so Stevie is also in big trouble. At this point, there isn't really much that Pam can do about it. He is, of course, now missed dinner, and she has to head out to work before 5 p.m. So Terry drives Pam to work. He heads back to the house. But again, Stevie is still not home. Soon after this, Chris, he finishes his chores, and he asks his mum if he can go out playing as well. She agrees, and Chris's hope is, of course, that he is going to manage to link up with Stevie and Michael. He wants to see this goddamn bicycle, you know?
Yeah, but I guess he doesn't know where they are at this point. He's just going to go looking around.
That's right. This actually is the last time any of the parents see any of the boys alive. But there are several credible sightings from this point on. Just as it was starting to get dark, a guy named Chris Wall sees two boys on their bikes heading toward Robin Hood Hills. Robin Hood Hills is kind of like the sort of de facto playground where a lot of the local kids hang out. It's on the edge of like a major kind of road. It's not that far from where the boys physically lived. And Adam, it has everything. There's a massive thicket of dense wood that runs along its edges. The kids would often like build tree houses and dens and things like that there. But there's also a drainage ditch, which is filled with like tadpoles and frogs. So you can imagine as an 8-year-old boy how that is just heaven.
Yeah, but this is at 7 o'clock at night, and I guess they look fine. They're by themselves, they're just cycling, so they clearly haven't obeyed their parents' orders.
No, but at the same time, it's also quite a normal thing to do. I mean, I would sometimes come home well after dark, and I grew up in the early 90s as well, so I get it.
Okay, but I guess, what I'm trying to understand at this point in time, it doesn't look suspicious, at least at this 7 o'clock sighting.
Other than the fact that Stevie was supposed to be home.
Yes.
But this Robin Hood Hills place where they're heading to is basically the ideal adventure for like kids. That's where they all go. We know Chris Wall's sighting of the boys is credible since he volunteered to take a polygraph test, which indicated that he was telling the truth. Later that evening at around 9 p.m., Terry goes to pick Pam up as scheduled. Stevie, Adam, has still not come home. And what he does next is very odd. Rather than waiting outside for Pam, as he usually does, he goes inside, he walks straight past Pam and makes a beeline for the payphone. Now, Pam thinks this is strange, but she doesn't interrupt. Instead, she goes out to the car where Amanda is sitting alone, and Pam is like, "Where's Stevie?" And Amanda says, "We can't find him." When Terry comes back to the car, of course, he confirms that Stevie is missing, and he says that the call that he was making in the restaurant was to the police to report her missing. Now, that does seem off to me because he didn't speak to Pam before placing that call. He just walked in, walked straight past her, and called the police. Like, I would be a little bit annoyed by that. Like, hang on, you just walk straight past me. That's not the first thing you tell me when you walk in.
Yeah, I guess so. But then is he like, should he have already called the police? But I guess he's waited. He's got there. First thing, let me just report this because...
But I would still go like, babe, I can't find Stevie. Where is he? Should we call the police? No, he just goes, takes charge. She doesn't know. She finds out that he's still missing from her daughter. To me, that's just off. Pam says on reflection, though, when Amanda says they couldn't find Stevie, she knew he was dead.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess if she gives him instructions, be home by this point, there's a serious reason why he's not home. You would think there's got to be a really good reason for this.
Yeah. Anyway, Adam, they rush home. They start searching. They link up with Michael and Chris's parents, who are also out searching for the boys at this point. Within 30 minutes, there's a search party that is formed with dozens of locals and the police that are all now out there looking for him, right? But Adam, that night, they do not find the boys. The next day, of course, the search resumes. Steve Jones, a former juvenile officer, decides to search the area around Robin Hood Hills again at around 1:45 p.m. As he's looking in the drainage ditch, he sees a black trainer floating in the water. He, of course, calls it in, and soon after that, Officer Mike Allen shows up and he heads into the water to try and retrieve the trainer. As Mike is making his way through the ditch, his leg catches on something underneath the water, but as he yanks himself free, he realizes it was one of the 3 boys that now had floated up to the surface of the water.
Oh my God.
Over the course of that afternoon, one by one, they find all 3 of their bodies.
And they're all in this drainage ditch.
That's right. Stevie and Chris, they're found near each other, but further upstream, they find Michael Moore. Now, they were separated. They weren't together. You could argue that they floated down, but they weren't. They were anchored to the bottom of that bed.
Anchored?
Yeah. They'd also all been hogtied using their own shoelaces. Hogtied means arms tied together behind your back, legs tied together, and then tethered together. So they're like...
There's no way for them to swim or anything.
However, what's strange about this is the boys had been tied with their left wrist to their left ankle and their right wrist to their right ankle. So this is not typical. What this means is that very easy you can just bring your arms to the front. You're then essentially not hogtied, but you are tied together. But because of the way they were found with their limbs behind their back, it suggests that they were tied up in this way after they were murdered, probably in an attempt to try and anchor them under the water. But Adam, this was far from the most gruesome part of what they found. The boys had also been stripped naked, and their clothes were found deliberately twisted around some sticks and wedged into the creek bed again to prevent them from floating up. What was missing was 2 pairs of the boys' underwear, which to this day have never been found.
Oh my word, that's disgusting.
Also, all over their tiny little bodies were these really severe deep cuts and lacerations, particularly on their face. Michael had the fewest injuries, but Chris Byers was in the worst condition, including having been castrated in what the court essentially described as him being degloved.
God.
So it is absolutely horrific. And there is a really famous documentary, which I did watch, but it doesn't warn you in the first few minutes that they are going to be showing you their bodies laid down on the riverbed. It is really raw, and I think that's quite important because it has the emotional impact that it does, but at the same time, they don't warn you about it.
I mean, you put a trigger warning, but even I was not prepared for what you just said.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But Adam, very quickly, based on how they were found and the extent of their injuries, the investigation pushed towards a very specific narrative that Stevie, Chris, and Michael had been killed as part of a satanic ritualistic murder.
I mean, I guess if that's in the zeitgeist, that kind of mindset of satanic cults and stuff like that, the injuries and the way that they've been found, you would think that.
Exactly. Yeah, like to us today, that's an extraordinarily leap to make. But at the time, it was very plausible, especially when you understand the cultural backdrop in which these murders took place. And that's because America was emerging from the shadow that was left behind from what we know today as the Satanic Panic. What do you remember of the Satanic Panic? It's not a lot. I mean, I had to go and refresh my memory.
I mean, I want to say, we've done so many episodes, Kyle.
Oh, you don't worry, Adam. I got you. I got you, boy. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it because a lot of people think that the Satanic Panic began with the McMartin preschool sexual abuse case in 1983.
There was a guy that was wrongly convicted, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And I'll explain that in just a second. But McMartin wasn't actually the beginning. It was actually a flashpoint after roughly 20 years of cultural fear, rumors, and moral kind of campaigning bubbling up under the surface. It kind of started in the late 1960s and the 70s when America becomes completely gripped by all sorts of kind of occult-flavored entertainment. You have films like The Exorcist exploding into the mainstream. This inspires an appetite for all sorts of occult-related media and news. People all over are gripped by real-life horror stories like Charles Manson and the family. You also have serial killers like the Zodiac Killer with those overt satanic overtones. These are the stories that really gripped America when they became news, right? Mm-hmm. If it had been any other time, I wonder whether or not they had been as big a sensation as they were at the time. This ends up being something evangelical movements really lean into. They're basically like, yep, not only is this real, it's also very organized and also it's coming for your kids. What is also happening during this period is massive reforms in how states start to report and handle child sexual abuse cases, or any abuse cases for that matter. The key change is that teachers, doctors, and social workers, they are now all mandated to report even a suspicion of a child being harmed. Suddenly, as you can expect, there is a flood of allegations that authorities feel that they have to investigate because it's now mandated by law. The problem is the people leading these investigations, they're not trained or equipped in how to deal with these, especially when it comes to interviewing these kids and separating the fact from the fiction. Because the reality is, as horrific as a sexual abuse claim is, and as absolutely the correct way to proceed forward is taking every single allegation seriously, you need to be trained in understanding what is a child's imagination versus what actually happened and apply critical thinking to those. Mm-hmm. That does not happen. You end up with adults' fears of the occult that's been bubbling up for the last 10 years, shaping the way that they question these kids. So there's a lot of leading questions. But also the adults, they want to be gentle. So they make these interviews fun. There are puppets. The kids get biscuits. There's lots of positive reinforcement, which the kids, like, they don't want that to end. So they tell the adults exactly what they want to hear.
Sounds like play school.
Yeah, it is. It's mental. There are a lot of adult fears of the occult that are being projected onto these kids who end up just responding in kind. So you can see how this is kind of slowly marching towards something stupid.
Yeah, this is jogging my memory now about the episode.
Yes. And what you end up with are stories of Satanists molesting children all over the country. Also, around this time, the reliance on daycare centers all of a sudden skyrockets. And this is because more and more mums are being pushed into the workforce because of rising inflation and the rising cost of living across the country during the 70s. And many of these mums, they don't want to leave their kids in the trust of strangers. And so you can understand how this would also elevate your anxiety. Mm. This anxiety explodes. In 1980, a book called Michelle Remembers is released. Do you remember this bit of the episode?
I'm sure you're going to remind me. Should have done a better episode, Carl.
We should have, yeah. Basically, it's about a woman who undergoes recovered memory therapy, and she discovers that throughout her life, she'd been sexually abused, often ritualistically, by her father and all of his friends. Of course, none of that ends up being true. But now you have already anxious parents believing that if someone was molesting their kids themselves might not even know about it.
Yes, yeah.
And it creates a psychological trap which detonates across America with what happens at McMartin Preschool in 1983. And so you can see the Satanic Panic is very much always accredited to what happened at this preschool. But the reality is that wasn't the start. It was everything that bubbled up for 20 years before this moment.
Okay, and then you've just got this kind of hysteria of people acting on false information, which is just it's kind of exasperating this kind of fear. Is there any truth to it?
Of course, I cannot speak for whether or not there were any satanic ritual killings of kids, but it wasn't at the level.
It wasn't a panic.
But it became a panic.
Yeah.
Now, to summarize what happened with the McMartin Preschool sexual abuse case, it all starts with a very stressed mother called Judy Johnson. Her marriage is on the rocks. She is suffering from mental health issues. She has a very young child that she has to care for, all while also caring for her older son who has a terminal brain tumor. I sympathize with her. It's not an easy time that she's going through. One day, her younger son, Matthew, complains that he has an itchy anus. Judy checks it, and then she proceeds to check it every day. She's constantly prodding at it. She's making sure it's clean, but she's using a makeup wipe to make sure it's clean. So, unbeknownst to her, the bitch is making it worse.
I see, yeah.
So, of course, it doesn't get better. And so Judy takes Matthew to his doctor, who explains to Judy that he is going to take Matthew's temperature rectally. He then turns to Matthew and says, Matthew, I'm going to take your temperature, okay? To which Matthew replies, that's what Ray does. Ray is his preschool teacher.
Right.
But what Matthew means is that Ray takes his temperature with a regular thermometer in his mouth, not up his bottom.
Yes, yeah.
But Judy, of course, she hears this differently, and she thinks the reason Matthew's anus is inflamed is because Ray has been molesting him. And so, Adam, long story short, go listen to the episode. What happens is the police get involved. Parents all over the country start panicking. Kids are dragged in droves to be interviewed. And again, all using puppets, and there's cookies, and there's loads of positive reinforcement. And the kids are like, yay, again. And what unfolds, Adam, are dozens of accounts of these kids that have been sexually abused by a satanic cabal made up of their teachers using a network of secret tunnels underneath their school.
And obviously, this was not true.
No, Adam, there are vivid accounts of satanic rituals, animals and baby sacrifices, descriptions of mutilations, which, as if by magic, would be fully healed when it came to pickup time at the end of the day. And kids are like, oh my God, I can't believe someone pierced your ears. And they're like, yeah, like with a stapler gun. And they're like, oh my God. But the kids' ears are fine.
Yeah, because the little Wolverines running around.
There are also accounts of being transported to these secret ranches by being flushed down toilets.
What?
It's crazy. Some of them say they're being taken to the secret ranch in a balloon where they saw witches flying on brooms and babies being sacrificed. Adam, it is an absolute fever dream. It is nuts.
It sounds like they've gone to a theme park.
Yes. Of course, these teachers at McMartin Preschool, their entire lives and reputations are completely destroyed. They are put through one of the longest criminal trials in American history. I think it's like something like 10 years. And in the end, nobody is convicted on the grounds of there being zero evidence.
I mean, in this situation, yeah, but I can't believe that took 10 years.
Yeah. The logic and the critical thinking only kicked in the 11th hour, basically. And
Hang on a minute. Has anyone thought about if the kids lied?
Yes, yeah. But remember, in the 1970s, they were now mandated to take all, even suspicions of sexual abuse very seriously. And kids are believed.
And that's fair enough.
Yes, there's a place for it, but also they're missing that very important bit of, let's just double check a thing.
Let's not incentivize them with cookies.
And recognize that kids are imaginative by design.
Yeah.
But Adam, none of that mattered. The coverage of the McMartin Preschool case had already instilled this common belief that America was overrun with Satanists preying on kids. And so by 1993, in the fallout of the McMartin Preschool case and everything that came before it, people across America are primed to accept this ready-made explanation that these three boys at Robin Hood Hills were murdered as part of some satanic ritual.
I mean, what you had before was obviously a misunderstanding and then this kind of I don't know, just went a bit hysterical. But here, fair enough, that wasn't true. But let's just say, like, if the Satanic Panic was a thing, then you've got these 3 boys that have been found naked, tied up with some serious, horrific injuries.
Mm-hmm.
That would make me believe that the Satanic Panic was a thing.
But this was 10 years later. Why did they not realize that actually, well, we got so much wrong with McMartin preschool case? In fact, no one was convicted. But there is something to be said for getting information out there, even if it's wrong, and not worrying about the retraction, because it doesn't matter. The retraction is always on page 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, people forget about that.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But also in West Memphis, the reason why they were more willing to accept this explanation was that this was a small, poor town, firmly in the heart of the Bible Belt. So with this notion that this was the work of a satanic cult, back in West Memphis, Jerry Driver, a juvenile probation officer, already had his own suspect who he believed did this. He believed it was a local teenager named Damien Echols. And Jerry's reasons were basically the warning signs that the Satanic Panic had told people to look out for. Damien wore all black.
Oh, right, okay.
He painted his nails. He listened to Metallica. Maybe played a couple games of Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, that was it.
It's a very big, sweeping stereotype there.
Exactly. Oh, one time Jerry sees him walking with a big stick that he had picked up in the woods, and Jerry claimed that was his satanic staff.
That's him hunting.
It's not just this, though. Like, as a juvenile probation officer, Jerry had plenty of run-ins with Damien over the years as well. In May 1992, Damien is 17. He's dating a 15-year-old. Their parents aren't happy about it and start talking about running away together. One night, they get busted breaking into an abandoned trailer. Like West Memphis, a lot of people living in a lot of trailers. When they're found in the closet in a very compromising position. Damien is, of course, charged with burglary and is charged with sexual misconduct. Which honestly boggles my mind because remember, she's underage too.
Okay, so he is a bit of a tearaway.
Damien is sent to juvie. This is where his mental health really takes a turn. After threatening suicide, he ends up being moved to a mental facility. He sort of recovers. He returns back to life in Arkansas. But Jerry has his eye on him firmly, and he is hell-bent on getting Damien for anything that he can. Mm-hmm. So when Damien violates his parole by contacting his ex-girlfriend, Jerry is the one who pushes to get him sent back to juvie. And Damien, like I said, he does not do himself any favors. He's not a bad kid. He's more misunderstood, but he really taunts Jerry. Like he deliberately goes out of his way to make his life miserable. It results in Damien being at the top of Jerry's list whenever a crime happens or they need a suspect. Even if it doesn't make any sense. For instance, there is a girl, she is murdered 100 miles away with no connection to West Memphis at all. Jerry brings Damien in for questioning. Another time, a bunch of equipment goes missing from a train that doesn't even stop in West Memphis.
It's got to be Damien.
It's got to be Damien. He's just relentless. One time, Jerry hears a rumor that Damien drinks blood, and he asks Damien if it's true.
Would you really believe that? I don't know, but I guess this police guy, he believes the Satanic Panic, essentially. And so he's just looking for any kind of, basically anything that would link to that.
Sure, but what he also needs at this moment in time is for Damien to say, no, I don't drink blood. But what Damien does is he tells him that he belongs to a cult.
Okay, he's not helping himself, but fair enough, he is just being a teenager.
Exactly. He's basically leaning in very heavily into what Jerry already suspects about him. Mm. And it's for no other reason than Damien just being an angsty teenager who really wants to piss this guy off because he keeps coming after him, right? Unjustifiably. Yeah. So the day after the boys are found, like clockwork, Jerry brings Damien in for questioning. Damien, however, he is probably caught off guard. Usually, like, he would keep Jerry guessing, but I think he recognizes just how serious these murders are, and he flat out denies these murders completely. Like, it's not something that he wants to play with, but Jerry doesn't buy that. If anything, Damien's denial feels suspicious to him because Damien's usual go-to is letting Jerry believe whatever he believes. So to him, that's very suspicious.
I think he's like, well, this is serious. It's not stealing something from a train.
So Jerry shares his suspicions with the police, who I don't think really take things seriously at first. But the news of the story has now exploded into a national story. It puts a lot of pressure on them to find someone who's done this. But of course, the narrative of this cult kind of involvement is now firmly getting itself embedded.
I guess that makes it difficult for the police to see it in any other way, right?
Exactly, yes. It's coming from all over the place, and before you know it, you've been living in it, breathing it, and that just becomes a de facto. And so with no other suspects, they take a look at Damien and his friends. And like I say, Damien doesn't help himself. Like, he knows the rumors are out there. And while he denied it to the police, he doesn't exactly shut it down when the kind of townsfolk start speculating about him. And I've tried to understand why. I think this just boosts his street cred as the local goth kid. Probably for the first time in his life, he's sort of notorious when he's always been sort of the kid living on the fringe.
Yeah, I guess he's probably not like a popular kid, but this is his way of getting attention.
Yeah. And so when people ask him at school, like, he doesn't confirm or deny it. He just lets them believe what they want to believe. It's a dangerous game that he's playing, but in his mind, he didn't do this. And so he believes the evidence and the investigation will just speak for itself, which is something that we grow up believing, like the police, the status quo,
justice prevails.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why when the police ask him for blood and hair samples, he just gives it to him without question. Like, he's got nothing to hide.
Mm.
And I think he may have been cleared since he really didn't do this. But that was until a woman named Vicky Hutchinson steps into the picture, Adam.
Who is Vicky?
So at the time of the murders, Vicky had only just been living in West Memphis for a few months. Her son Aaron had become friends with Stevie, Chris, and Michael through, obviously, school. And Vicky Hutchinson, Adam, she's bad news. She's got like a bunch of outstanding warrants for check fraud. She's also a known liar. At one time, she bails on a job by telling her boss that she had a terminal brain tumor just to get out of work.
Wow, what an excuse.
What if she needs to go back to work? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm healed.
Yeah, it turns out it wasn't terminal.
On the day that Stevie, Chris, and Michael's bodies are found, Vicky is actually at the police station taking a polygraph test. There's so many fucking polygraph tests in this story.
What is she taking that for?
So she's been accused of stealing money from a till at work.
Right. And she did?
100% she probably did it, knowing her track record. She's also there with her son Aaron, who is going wild in the waiting room because no one is watching him. So one of the polygraph technicians, Don Bray, he tries to distract him. And during that interaction, Aaron says he knows where the missing boys are.
So had they found the boys at this point?
They had, but it hadn't been made public yet. He says they're at the playhouse, which is like a little den/tree house in the Robin Hood Hills woods.
Mm-hmm.
So Don calls it in, and not long after that, it's confirmed that the boys were found near where Aaron had said.
Mm-hmm.
So they speak to Aaron again, and he tells them that recently in the woods, he saw two men dressed up in robes speaking a different language. He actually says Spanish, but I've changed that because that's his way of saying gibberish, basically.
He says they were speaking Spanish, but he meant like just another language.
Yeah, like when we go, oh, that's just gibberish. Some people say, oh, that's just Spanish.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
But he also says they were having sex with each other. So it might just be some doggers.
But the two people in robes?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the story's true, but the logical explanation is, oh, you found a pair of doggers in the woods. And so this fits the already established narrative that this was all occult related. So the police, they speak to Vicky and they offer her a deal. If she wears a wire and speaks to Damien to see if he was perhaps involved in some way, they will make all of her outstanding warrants just go away. The police have the power to do that. Isn't that great? They also tell her that if any of the information that she gets leads to an arrest, she'll get the $30,000 reward that the police have offered.
That feels wrong. Why tell her that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a massive incentive for Vicky to deliver, especially given her situation, right? The money would be life-changing for her.
Mm.
But Vicky doesn't know Damien personally. She does, however, know someone who does, and that is a local kid called Jessie Misskelley. He's basically a kid that sometimes babysits her son, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
He knows Damien from obviously being around the neighborhood. The problem is, Jessie doesn't know Damien in that way. So it's a bit awkward, her arranging for him to kind of go and create an introduction so she can lure into her trailer. It's awkward. So now you've got this kid, Jessie, who's going up to Damien going, I have this friend. Her name's Vicky. She wondered if you want to get to know her. It's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah, okay.
Jessie is eager to please, so he does make the introduction, and soon after that, Damien agrees to go to Vicky's trailer one evening.
So Vicky's a sort of, what, in her 30s, 40s?
Probably,
like
yeah. She's got a young kid, probably.
So he's thinking, oh, I'm going to go score with some...
I thought so. That's straight away. Like, what 18-year-old's like, oh, some chick wants me to go to a trailer. Yeah. He thinks they want to bang.
Yeah.
So to steer the conversation towards occult stuff and then the murders, she strategically places occult-related books and props all over the trailer. And while they talk about the occult, Damien doesn't actually say anything incriminating. If anything, they talk about how most of his personality was just like a front and that he was actually a really damaged kid.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they talk about.
So is this recorded as well?
Yes. However, when the police listen to the tapes, it's completely distorted and they can't work out anything that's been said.
Right.
Which initially is a bummer for Vicky, because of course she's motivated by the money. But then she finds a way to turn this into an opportunity, because she tells police, no problem, I can hear the tape very clearly, let me translate it for you. And then she walks them through what he's saying in every little bit. So it'll be like, and he's like, oh yeah, he said like this here.
This is where he said he would eat sheep's stomach.
Yeah.
So what I don't understand is you've said that what they actually talked about was the fact that he's a bit of a damaged kid. Who confirmed that? Because if there's no tape that says that.
It'll be Vicky.
Okay.
Much later on, when she doesn't get the reward money and the court cases are all done and they've been convicted and Damien is on death row and still he doesn't get out.
What an escalation.
She basically spins this whole encounter into something incriminating, which the police are all too happy to basically accept. Like, the bitch wanted the money, and after all, she had come this far already. Like, she'd got him to the trailer, she'd gone through the recording, she'd worn the wire, and now it was like, the way she saw it was just one more nudge this way to then maybe get that money.
But even if, say, if the tape was legible and they could hear, and there's actually nothing damning on that, would she have gotten the money anyway?
I don't know the circumstances why she didn't actually get the money in the end. I think the police were potentially just using this as a carrot to dangle over in front of people's faces.
Isn't it crazy? Because you just think, we've done so many stories where police are corrupt or they've taken shortcuts or there's this bias or whatever. And you just, so many times we just see justice not being done properly. Yeah.
It's changed our whole worldly outlook from when we were kids, where we just trusted that the police are on our side. And they're not.
If you think about it, we are looking at probably some of the most extreme cases to do these kind of topics, right? If we went in and saw every single crime of every week, no matter what it was, chances are it probably is, but it still feels like there's too many across the world.
I mean, we are right in the thick of it, right? It's what we do for a living. We cover these stories about criminal misinjustice and all sorts of things. So, yeah. But anyway, Adam, with Vicky's information, 2 weeks go by and the police haven't arrested Damien. So she decides to up the stakes and she tells the police that Damien and Jessie, her babysitter, remember, took her to an SBAT, which is basically a coven meeting of other Satanists. She says that when they got there, people were dressed in robes, speaking Spanish, including kids. And at some point, the whole thing devolved into a massive orgy. And that is when she claims she got very uncomfortable and asked Damien to take her home.
Okay.
It sounds insane, and the police don't really know what to make of it, but then a kid named William Jones comes forward and he claims that one night Damien drunkenly admitted to raping and killing all 3 of the boys. That does turn out to be a lie, because once the police make the arrest and the trial is about to start, this William kid realizes that he has to then testify under oath, and so he retracts his statement. Now, his statement is the thing that kind of leads police to go, okay, we've got Vicky's statement, now we've got this William guy's testimony, let's arrest him. So you would think if one of those things fall apart, that kind of dismantles everything.
Yeah.
Except, Adam, by the time all of that happens, by the time this William guy retracts his statement, it doesn't matter, because the police now had a full confession.
From Damien?
Let's get into it. So off the back of Vicky's claims that Damien and Jessie took her to an SBAT, the police show Aaron a photo lineup of 7 random people, and Damien and his best friend Jason Baldwin are in that lineup, as well as Jessie.
Okay.
They ask Aaron if any of the faces look familiar, referring to faces he might recognize from the night that he saw the men in the woods. But Aaron thinks they're looking for just any familiar face in general. And so he picks out the only person he recognizes, and that is his babysitter, Jessie.
Right. So once again, it's just don't trust kids completely.
Exactly.
Just question it first.
And so now the police are very, very interested in speaking to Jessie. Now, Jessie's background really matters in the story. Jessie is raised by his dad as a single parent. His mum apparently bails on them when he's like 4. His brother is very severely mentally disabled, and Jessie is not too bright either. In fact, Jessie's IQ is around 72. And that means that he's basically operating at a 5 to 8-year-old level.
Okay.
Growing up, doctors persistently recommend special education classes for him, but that never actually ends up happening. And now he's in his late teens, and now that's basically definitely off the table. So when the police bring Jessie in, he doesn't have the mental capacity to understand what is happening or how high the stakes are at this point. And the police don't really do much to account for the fact that he has a mental disability when he's finally in the interview chair.
Mm-hmm.
So the police, they show up at Jessie's house. The officer tells Jessie's dad that they wanted to talk to Jessie about Damien because they think that he could help. Not that Jessie is a suspect in any way. Jessie's dad is a little bit weary, but he's very quickly won over by the mention of a $30,000 reward.
$30K again.
Mm-hmm. Jessie himself, he knows that this money will be life-changing for his family, and so he tells his dad, listen, I want to help. And so he agrees, thinking that the police are just going to ask him a few routine questions about a kid that Jessie knows from school. At the station, they ask Jessie about the SPAT, which he immediately denies, because it was, of course, a lie to begin with. They ask him if he'll take a polygraph test, and Jessie doesn't really know what that means, but he agrees. They go back to his dad. They ask for permission, since obviously Jessie is a minor. His dad is again hesitant, but the police, again, they reassure him, and again, they bring up the reward. And they say that if Jessie was in trouble, we would have asked you to waive his Miranda rights, which we did not do. So you've got nothing to worry about.
But they're just trying to get something incriminating first, and then they can do that.
Exactly. So with his dad reassured, Jessie is asked 10 yes or no questions. He answers them all truthfully, except for one, when he is asked if he's ever used drugs. He says no. After the test, the officers tell him, I'm sorry, Jessie, it's clear that you were lying. But they don't tell him that it was about the drug question. They tell him with all the questions.
Right.
Of course, he panics. In the end, he admits, okay, I lied about the drugs, but everything else was true. They don't accept this, and so they keep pushing him, and they push him for hours and hours. And it's not even productive, Adam. They just go round in circles and circles, which you know can be very, very exhausting when I question you in circles for hours. Where have you been? Who are you with? What does she smell like?
Yeah. So they're doing this all off the basis of what Aaron has said, that he recognized or he misunderstood the question.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Remember, Jessie can't navigate this. He's got the mental capacity of an 8-year-old. And with that, he still has this belief that the police are someone that you can trust. If they are telling me that I'm lying, maybe I am, is what he's thinking. He just wants to please them, as kids do. They tell him that if he tells the truth, they will let him go home. And so the pressure at this point is coming from every single angle. The detectives, they then decide to pull out some photos of the boys' bodies. And they make him look at it, Adam, and he's terrified by this. It is awful. Then Detective Gary Gitchell, he plays him a short audio clip of Aaron. Now, Jessie doesn't know this is Aaron's voice, but the voice says, nobody knows what happened but me. And so the police insinuate that the voice in the tape has told them that Jessie has done this.
Like, I know the police can obviously manipulate the truth to a level to obviously get a confession, but this just feels so unfair and based on nothing.
And taken way too far and not accounted for who Jessie is. Yes, Jessie is an 18-year-old kid or whatever he is, but mentally he is an 8-year-old kid. Would you treat Aaron like this?
Yeah, you wouldn't, would you?
It's totally unfair. Of course, as you can imagine, Jessie is now very anxious. But then Gary draws a circle on a piece of paper. He puts 3 dots on the inside and then a bunch more dots on the outside. And he tells Jessie, the dots on the inside are Damien, Jason, and him. The dots on the outside are the police and everyone else. And then he asks him, which side do you want to be on? Inside with Damien and Jason, or outside with the police?
And obviously he's going to say, well, the police.
Exactly. So from here, Adam, the police interrogate this boy for 12 hours. But get this. Out of the full 12-hour interrogation, there only exists 43 minutes of footage. And that is because the rest of the time, they were basically coaching a confession out of him that lined up with exactly what they believed already happened.
So they're saying, we need you to say these things, and got him to repeat it over and over again to then capture it.
They're very sneaky about it. They'll ask, like, what time did you meet up with Damien and Jason at Robin Hood Hills? And he's like, I didn't. And he's like, tell us the truth. And he's like, 9:30 a.m. And the police are like, well, the boys were at school at that time. That can't be right, Jessie. And so Jessie, knowing that he'll get to go home if he tells them what they want to hear, he then says, 2:30 p.m. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, no, the boys are still at school there. They were accounted for at that point. And they're like, are you sure? Was it perhaps getting dark at the time, Jessie? And Jessie is like, yeah, it was getting dark. And so the police are like, would you say it was maybe around about 7 or 8? And Jessie is like, yes, it was between 7 or 8. And they're like, well, was it 7 or 8? And he's like, 7. And they're like, are you sure it wasn't 8? And he's like, yeah, it was 8.
Oh my God.
And then they're like, good. I don't know why you just didn't say that to begin with, Jessie. And all the while, Jessie's just apologizing because they're making him feel like he is messing them around.
Does he have like a lawyer with him or at all?
He's not being arrested. He doesn't know. He doesn't have the mental capacity to navigate the situation. But he does not know.
But then his dad is like, why is my son in there for 12 hours? Surely he's like, hang on a minute, something is up.
Probably also doesn't know the process, right? For all he knows, this is normal. Adam, this goes on for hours, and basically they coach out a full eyewitness testimony of how Damien and Jason killed these boys. Right now, it's just the two of them, Damien and Jason. They coach him into describing Damien punching one of the boys and how they stripped him naked, tied them up, raped them, and did all these awful things to them. They get him to describe how they mutilated them with a knife before beating them unconscious. But before he killed them, he says that, of course, he fled the scene. So he wasn't part of the murder.
Right.
Part of it.
Okay, which is part of this confession deal.
Yes. Now, he's basically given the cops exactly what they've needed. He would have been allowed to go home if only he hadn't, during the coaching, accidentally incriminated himself. Because at one point he says that Michael Moore had broken loose, and he describes how he chased him down, held him down until the other boys arrived. And so because of that, he is arrested and he is taken to a fucking cell.
But he's just made up. I can't believe how... If you're the police right now, obviously you want to find justice, but why would you do this? You're pinning it on him just because of Damien, essentially.
Isn't it shocking?
I was just thinking, could you be so stupid or misguided to think, oh, this definitely happened?
Of course, Adam, once he realizes that he is not going home, he recants his entire confession. But by then, of course, it is too late. Here's the thing, though. When Jessie finally does get a lawyer, he tells him, of course, that obviously none of this was true. But the second that they are back in front of the police, Jessie flips and he's like, yeah, I did it.
Why?
And his lawyer's like, hold on. What are you doing? Jessie's basically like, I thought I had to tell the police what they wanted to hear. And his lawyer's like, okay, you need to stop talking. And you need to understand that the police are not your friend. They are not here to help you. I am here to help you. Adam, it gets wilder than you can even imagine, because at one point his lawyer is talking him through the case and Jessie stops him and goes, what's Saturn? And then his lawyer's like, what? He's like, yeah, Saturn, what is that? And his lawyer's like, do you mean Satan? And Jessie's like, yeah, what is that? And so he's implicated in a satanic ritual murder of 3 8-year-old boys, and he doesn't even know what Satan is.
This kind of explains everything.
It does. It's wild. And so off the back of this coerced confession, the police, they go ahead and they arrest Damien and Jason, and they start preparing a trial against them. Here's the thing. Because of Jessie's confession, he can't be tried alongside Damien and Jason, and that's because of something called the Brunton rule, which prevents a confession from one defendant that implicates a co-defendant from being used as evidence in a joint trial. So they have to be separated in terms of the trial. So Damien and Jason will be trialed together, and Jesse will receive his own separate trial, which will go first. And that is key.
Okay. So they've got a confession, but surely they need some tangible evidence as well, right?
Yeah. Let's look at some of that tangible evidence and see how the jury treat that evidence, shall we? He is assigned a court-appointed attorney who initially thinks this is a cut and dry case, and that probably he is just there to get Jesse the best deal he possibly can because Jesse likely did this. The second he looks at the case, he is like, what the fuck? And at trial, of course, he brings up, where is the missing footage from the 12-hour interview? Why was Jesse never read his Miranda rights? Why, if he was the Satanist, did he not understand who Satan even was? Even in court, his attorney had to explain it again and again, to Jesse. And Jesse's just like, oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, you said about Satan. Yeah, I know who he is, yeah. He, repeatedly. Jesse's story also keeps changing. Not because he is lying, it's because he is struggling to remember a false memory that the police have planted in on him.
Yeah, that's true.
They even get Detective Gary Gitchell, back on the stand. They ask him, did it ever occur to you that Jesse might have been giving you a false story? And Gary is like, no. All I can say is there were just times during his confession where he was just getting really confused.
What, the whole 12 hours?
Yes, because you were coaching him, to your will.
How could you know to send someone innocent down? Yeah, for something as severe as this, I just think, what kind of piece of shit are you?
Yeah. They also call all of his alibi witnesses. This is Jesse. Mm-hmm. It's not just one person, it's literally an entire class, because the night that all of this was supposed to have happened, he was at a wrestling practice in a different fucking county. How did this even get to court? I just don't get it. 4 of the kids, they all take the stand under oath. They all say that they wrestled with Jesse that night, even describing how he got injured. They all agree on that. They all also agree that they all left at 11 p.m. that night, long after the murders had happened, supposedly.
So why was that not enough for them to go, okay, we need to just take a break and look at this case?
So the prosecution, they picked on one of the witnesses, dates that he said. He got it the week before. And he's like, well, if you got that wrong, maybe that kind of quashes all of the other people's testimony.
It's one person.
It's stupid. They managed to argue this. I don't get it.
Are they saying like they're all in cahoots?
You just need to plant that seed of doubt. You know? The only witness they really had that could even remotely help the prosecution was William Jones, the guy who claims Damien had drunkenly admitted to raping and killing the boys, not Jessie. This is Damien that he's implicating. That's the best that they had, and it didn't even directly incriminate Jessie. As we know, a few hours before, obviously, he was due in court, William pulls out, and it's because he admitted that he'd made it all up. So all of this, you would think, looks good for Jessie, possibly even looking good for Damien and Jason for when their trials start. Because remember, like, Jessie has solid alibis, right? There's very clear evidence that he was coerced. He didn't even know what Satan was, right? The only credible witness that the prosecution thought they had pulled out in the final hour.
Yeah, for me, to only make this stick now, you need DNA evidence or something like that.
Exactly. But then, Adam, they bring in Vicky fucking Hutchinson. She obviously sticks to her story. She tells them about the false SBAT, a coven meeting, very persuasive to the jury. Oh, by the way, when she retracts her statement later on after both court cases are done, she says that night she was so drunk that she woke up in her front yard the next day with no recollection of what had happened. And so, therefore, she believes that she may have dreamt the whole thing. Isn't that wild?
Or just admit you lied. So I guess, are the jury considering, oh, this is a young mother, why would she be lying about this?
Just look at the past, for God's sake.
But then all these other kids, oh, they could be lying sort of thing. It makes sense they're lying, but this is a mother, she wouldn't do that.
Adam, it's just so wild to me. Like, us going through this evidence, to us, it's clearly all bullshit. But in those moments on the stand, this is very persuasive testimony that is rooted, remember, in cultural fear.
Yeah, but then did anyone even go like, okay, she went to this meeting. Should we try and go to another one of these meetings, track down who else was involved? Did they ever even think of that?
Doesn't sound like it, does it? So in spite of zero evidence linking him to the scene, everything hinges on Vicky's testimony and his coerced conviction. And so in the end, Jessie, unbelievably, he is found guilty of capital murder for Michael Moore because he had held him down, and as a result, he is sentenced to 40 plus years in prison. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And it's because Vicky's testimony really plucks at the strings of something that's really deep rooted in people's hearts and their minds and the zeitgeist, the cultural zeitgeist. It's wild. So Jesse's been sent down basically to 40 years in damn jail.
I mean, if he committed this, absolutely. That's the right sort of sentence. But he didn't.
I mean, it's pretty damn clear he was coerced into that confession. I think even the prosecution were a little bit surprised at how easily the jury found Jesse guilty. They weren't really sure whether or not they'd be so lucky with Damien and Jason's trial. However, the fact that he was found guilty certainly wasn't going to hurt the second trial.
Yeah.
And we know this because on two separate occasions, just weeks before the trial, they actually approached Jason Baldwin. And they basically offer him a deal of 20 years in prison if he testified against Damien. He, of course, says no, and then they offer him 10 years.
Really?
Yeah.
That's strange. I guess if you're that kid, obviously you're going to deny it because you didn't do it. But the fact that Jesse has been found guilty, that you feel like, do I take this? Is this my best chance at a lenient sentence?
Again, Jason's one of those kids that believe that the justice will prevail. He's like, why would I accept any time in prison? A court will see that I did not do this. I am innocent, and so is Damien. So their trial moves forward. The prosecution start by calling in an expert on all things the occult. They have him walk through how Damien kind of fits the classic profile of a Satanist. And Adam, it is bullshit because it all hinges on people who dress a certain way, like listen to metal music, paint their nails black, all the stuff that we've already discussed in terms of what Jerry believed.
It's a good thing emo wasn't around back then.
I know,
because
right?
half the school would have been taken down.
Basically, everything that Damien is, this expert says, is classic Satanism. The defense countered this, though, by questioning this expert's qualifications. They ask him, where did you study? Where did you graduate? What are real-life cases that you've been involved in where your expertise has helped incriminate satanic crimes? Turns out, the motherfucker didn't even go to college. He has never worked on a case before, and this is the first time he's ever stood as an expert witness in a criminal trial. And his expertise is the result of him sending off for a mail-in course. Basically, like Open University, but by post. And at the end of it, you don't even get accredited.
Wow, so they've just got someone who's, done a bit of research, if that.
He read a book, basically, that any motherfucker could have written in his mum's basement. That's his expertise.
Yeah, and so he's going to say, yeah, this is a tried and tested, this is an absolute evidence of a cult.
That's right. And yet he is up there testifying as an expert in a murder trial that centers around a very serious crime involving the occult. It's so scary that this was even allowed to happen. But because even with the defense pointing this out, this information is now embedded in the jury's heads. So it is too late to put that genie back in the bottle, right? He's already gone. I'm an expert, blah, blah, blah. This is what this means. And he fits this profile. There's also something very strange about this trial, because they can't directly use Jesse's confession verbatim against them, since Jesse recanted it and it would violate the defendant's Sixth Amendment rights under the Bronson rule that I explained earlier on. Instead, they have detectives testify that Damien knew certain things that were said in the confession that he would only have known if he had done this. So it's a lot of like maneuvering in this. It's called basically a confession via non-hearsay means. And these detectives are basically telling the court that Damien knew things like Chris Beyer having been mutilated more than the other boys, right? Information that was never made public. But the defense are like, that is not true. Here's a news article. Here's another news article. Here's a TV broadcast where all those details are explicitly outlined. And also, Jerry Driver, the juvenile officer that was intent on getting Damien, had told him a shit ton of stuff when he was like questioning him about the murders. And so, Adam, it is just a shit show. And I didn't mention this in my notes, but they also bring in a bunch of alibis as well for the boys, specifically for Damien. That night, he is on the record of being on the phone with a bunch of different girls. He was a little whore.
So it's not even like the case that he could have been there on a mobile phone, because mobile phones weren't a thing or not commonplace by that point.
You need to be at home and you need to call that person's mum and say, can I please speak to Damien, please? Is that kind of thing.
And so therefore, surely his parents or someone else has got an alibi for him to say he was at home.
Adam, I wasn't at this trial. I just don't understand how the prosecution were able to maneuver this in a way that was persuasive to this jury.
They're so blinded, like you say, with this kind of fear of satanic panic.
Yeah,
they just can't see anything past that, I think. I think they've already locked into that. It doesn't matter what anyone says.
That's the only explanation. So the prosecution, they call Michael Carson to the stand. He'd been in juvenile detention with Jason Baldwin while he was awaiting his trial. And he says that Jason had confessed to castrating Chris Byers, then sucking his blood from his penis and his scrotum, and then putting the boy's testicles in his mouth in what he described as a sexual act.
Even just to make that up is gross.
It is a shocking testimony, and naturally the jury, they are horrified by this. But under cross-examination, the defense, they start pulling at the dates when he said this supposedly happened. In Michael's official statements, he said this happened on the 26th of August, 4 days after he first met Jason. Yet, he told his mother this story on the 15th of August and his girlfriend on the 17th of August, and they were saying, how can that be since you didn't even meet Jason until the 22nd of August?
So has this guy just got a bit of a vendetta against Damien?
The implication is that he formulated this from media coverage that he was reading ahead of him knowing that Jason was potentially coming to that particular detention center. Mm-hmm. So he's like, this notorious killer's coming here, let's look into it, and then rumors and stuff. But they also do point out that there is a very strange coincidence that his burglary charge is downgraded to a suspended sentence just days after he submitted that statement. And the implication there is that he had struck a deal with the prosecution.
This prosecution is so bloody twisted.
Yeah. Next, the prosecution present what they heavily imply to be the murder weapon that was used. They show a Rambo-style serrated hunting knife that was found 6 months after the murders by a neighbor who was wading through a lake that is literally just outside of Jason's family's trailer. Mm-hmm. It's tested. They find no blood. There's no DNA. The only thing they find is a very fine red fiber matching a robe belonging to Jason's mother. They bring in a medical examiner. This is a guy called Frank Coretti. He's going to be important. He testifies that a knife like this could have been consistent with the boy's wounds. So it's very circumstantial. It doesn't prove this was a murder weapon. It was actually Jason's knife, by the way. The reason why it was in the lake is because his mum was like, you're 15 years old. What the hell are you doing with a bloody knife? And she throws it into the lake a year earlier because she was like, you've got no business playing with knives. The prosecution basically argued that Jason must have fished it out before the murders, then tossed it back once the murders were done. And by the end of the trial, the key evidence was relying on Jessen's confession via non-hearsay means, which, as we saw, they quashed that, that information was everywhere. They had Michael Carson's testimony, which they quashed that as well. The knife linking to Jason's mum. Amazingly, Adam, they find them both guilty of capital murder.
It's kind of, I just think about the parents, Damien and Jason's parents, and Jesse's as well. What they must have think, because they're probably thinking, did my son do this? Are they lying? They will be questioning their son.
It's crazy, isn't it? So, of course, the court case is way more in depth than what we cover today because we could be here for days. There are loads of podcasts and documentaries out there that go through what happened day by day. But those are the key things, and that's what the conviction pretty much hinged on, which is wild. It's so weak. Jason gets life in prison without the possibility of parole, and Damien gets the fucking death penalty via lethal injection.
And he's what, 18?
Yeah. And so, Adam, from 1994 to 2007, the three of them enter this game of appeal ping pong. Each time they try to appeal, it is flat out denied. And the reason for this is that every single appeal is reviewed by the same judge that found them guilty to begin with.
Yeah, no way is he going to go, oh, actually, let me just remark my homework.
Yeah. And they gather loads of new evidence along the years as well. And he reviews this and he still says, no dice, which is terrible, especially for Damien, because remember, he is on a ticking clock.
Yeah. And how common is that? Do you know, like, should it not go in front of someone completely impartial?
You would think so. Adam, it just doesn't. And they just end up in this stalemate. And it's because of this corrupt judge who just keeps blocking them at every turn.
He's probably like best friends with the police officer or something. They're probably all in it in this kind of weird group in terms of trying to maintain this.
Well, we don't know for definite, but we definitely have some theories, and we're going to come on to the reason why this might have been the case, because it comes clear with the thing that sets these boys free. And I'll explain that in a second. But for Damien, he is dealt a massive blow when he goes to file appeal again, and he is told that a bunch of vital evidence in his case was all destroyed in a fire.
You just lose hope, right? But is that true that the evidence was destroyed? Because so far, things aren't going the way of the boys. I just feel like something foul play is happening here.
Adam Cox, you just put a pin in that.
Okay.
This kind of appeal ping pong goes on for 14 years and they just keep hitting roadblock after roadblock.
14 years is such a long time to try and, I guess, keep on going, trying to keep positive, thinking that you could get out. But these are now, they're in almost 30. They are 30. Damn.
A lot goes on during those 14 years. And again, we can't go through it all. So we're going to jump ahead to 2007 when there is an interesting twist in the case. Examiners looking at the shoelaces that are used to tie the boys up, they find embedded within one of the knots a single hair. Now, this could only be there if whoever owned the hair was the person tying them up. So this is significant, right?
So the hair's got caught in a knot and they didn't find this before?
So this could either confirm at least one of the boys did this or place someone else at the scene. The DNA is tested. It is, of course, mitochondrial DNA. I probably butchered that. Basically, it means this isn't a unique fingerprint to one person. Instead, it's an indicator to a whole maternal line. It would point the finger at you and your siblings, for example, but it will also point the finger at your mum, but your mum's siblings, your grandma, and then your grandma's siblings. So up the maternal line. So it could be anyone in that line.
Sure, but it could, in theory, rule you out because if you don't share anything within that maternal line.
Yeah. They test the hair. It does not match any of the West Memphis Three or any of the victims.
So it does rule them out.
Yes. But they do find a match.
Who?
Stevie's stepfather, Terry Hobbs.
Hang on, so just remind me, is he the one that went to call the police?
Yes.
Ah, that's interesting.
Now, it could be argued that it is plausible that the hair would be there since obviously they live in the same household, right? Mm-hmm. Also, it could be Terry's mum's DNA. So grandma's going and murdering people.
True. Don't rule out
Or any
grandma.
of the siblings, yeah. But there is also still a lot to be said for the fact that it was caught inside that ligature knot, right? Mm-hmm. Also, Terry Hobbs does not have an alibi for his whereabouts on the night of the murders.
But I guess no one's even considering it's him, though, right, at this point? Or before they had.
It's 101
Yeah.
of, you found a body? Check the family.
Yeah.
So on the basis of this new evidence, Damien, Jason, and Jesse's attorneys, they push for a retrial. And since the DNA points to someone on the maternal line, even though it is strong in terms of where it was found, the DNA itself doesn't specifically incriminate any one single person. So if they are going to argue for a retrial, they need to, as well as the DNA, undermine the foundation that this case was a satanic ritual killing.
Mm-hmm.
They find that angle when they discover, remember Frank Peretti? He is the guy who testified that the knife was likely the one used to kill or injure the boys. Well, they discover that he is not even qualified.
Right.
In fact, he failed his exams twice and refused to take them for a third time. And so he was just like, well, fuck it. I already got my job working at the examiner's office. I'm in no rush to take my exams. And so what they decide to do is they decide to bring in a brand new examiner. It is someone very credible, world-renowned pathologist Vincent DeMaio. Now, he reviews the evidence and he says, yeah, the autopsies were very thorough, but they were conclusively wrong. He says the boys' injuries, including Chris's castration, in no way matched that knife. In fact, it did not match a knife at all because they are not knife wounds.
Hang on.
They were bite marks from snapping turtles.
What?
Yes. So that drainage ditch where the boys were found was locally known as Turtle City on the basis that they were crawling with turtles, right? To prove this, Vincent volunteers to let a snapping turtle bite him, and the injuries perfectly line up with the injuries they find on the boys all over their bodies.
You said there was loads of tadpoles in there, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in that water. Like it's loads of fauna and grubs and bugs and turtles as well.
How did they not? Oh, because the guy was incompetent. Yeah, that's why. But geez.
So they want to test this now a bit, and they test to see how a turtle might maybe attack or consume a pig. And just as they saw with the boys, the turtles make a beeline for all of the soft tissues on the body, including the ears, the cheeks, the nose, and of course, the genitals.
Mm.
And so, Adam, this is massive. This completely undermines the entire basis of the entire case that this was not a satanic ritual killing. And so combine that with the DNA and combine that with the fact that it was turtles doing this, they might have grounds for a retrial, right?
I want to say yes.
Wrong. Exactly. In 2008, again, they file all of this information. They show the DNA. They show kind of the pathologist report, and he rejects it yet again.
The same judge.
Same judge.
Get him out. Sack him.
And so they have no choice now but to go to Supreme Court. It takes 2 years, but eventually they order a new judge. This is a guy called David Laser to take a look at the evidence. And he agrees there are, in fact, grounds for a retrial. But he says it comes at a massive risk for Jessie, Jason, and Damien. He says that if they are found guilty, again, that is it. No more appeals. They will be sent to prison for life and Damien will be executed.
This is their last chance. They have to be so sure and make sure everything is in order.
But how confident will you be when the way that you get an innocent verdict is through a jury who are dead set on believing that there are Satanists out there killing everyone?
The only thing I can think of at this point in time, if it's 2007, maybe some of that mindset has dissipated.
But it's not the avenue that they're going to go down.
Oh.
So the boys' lawyers, they call a meeting with the state and the prosecution. They have a plan. They know that the state doesn't want to bear the costs of a retrial. They also know that the state is terrified that they could be found innocent because that's a massive miscarriage of justice that they should have known about.
Yeah.
The prosecution, they don't want a retrial either, and that's because after 18 years, several of their key witnesses have died, but also many of those original experts have been disgraced, like Frank Peretti. So knowing this, the defense lawyers floats an idea, and that is the Alford plea. Basically, this is where Damien, Jason, and Jessie, they all plead guilty, but the state lets them go with time served and probation. So if the boys agree, they all go free. There's no expensive retrial. The state doesn't have to worry about being sued or having to pay compensation later on down the line. It protects their reputation, and the prosecution at least get to say, well, they pleaded guilty, so technically it's a win for us.
That's not okay, though, is it? They've been in prison for the majority or half of their lives, pretty much. They need to rebuild their lives. Everyone thinks it's them. That's not okay.
For Jessie, especially Damien, remember he's sitting on death row, this is a no-brainer. But for Jason, the idea of going free by pleading guilty is not something that he wants. So he initially says no, and he is happy to stay in jail while the others go free. But here's the catch. The Alford plea can't happen unless all three of them agree.
Really?
And so Jason saying no means that he is condemning his friend Damien to death.
Like, I don't know how you deal with that. I wouldn't want to be the reason someone is going to die.
Adam, in the end, It is a no-brainer. Like, to save Damien's life, Jason agrees to the Alford plea. He signs it. And so on the 9th of August 2011, after 18 years in prison, all three of them walk out of their courtroom as free citizens.
But do they have a criminal record because they admitted that they were guilty?
Technically, they are guilty. Yes, they have a criminal record. They pleaded guilty, but they are free.
How do they rebuild their lives? Because you have to declare if you are, got a criminal record. Mm-hmm. What's that for? Oh, for murdering children. Yeah,
I think in a case as big as this, de facto, they're innocent. And I think a lot of people at this moment in time believe that they're innocent. This is also why the public are outraged by the Alford plea, because they recognize they can't go and sue the state for a miscarriage of justice, and that just outrages the public even more.
Good.
But there is a tragic consequence to the Alford plea. It ends up not triggering the process of reopening the investigation, meaning that the real killer is still out there and is scot-free.
Yeah, because if you're like the families of these victims and you've come to realize what a farce this has been, you can accept them going free. But you'd want justice still, right?
Exactly. You'd want them to continue searching for whoever did this. Of course, when this is reported on about the Alford plea, this causes massive outrage across America. And it's because over the years, since 1996, there have been so much interest in this case. There have been a ton of documentaries like the Paradise Lost trilogies that have been made on the story. And they meant that people had woken up to what, as you said, what a farce this case had been from the very start. It's partly why the state liked the idea of the Alford plea to begin with, because it meant that they would never, ever need to answer to the public. And also, if the boys got out free, they would never be able to even ask for compensation for being incarcerated for 18 years. But the idea of the Alford plea meant that the real killer would never be looked into. And that to the public was just an outrage. And so one of the people who this really strikes is producer Peter Jackson. Of course, we will know him from films such as
Lord of the Rings,
The Hobbit, and King Kong.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He's outraged by the blatant miscarriage of justice of this case, and he decides that he's going to do his own investigation. So along with his wife, Fran Walsh, they start working on their own documentary called West of Memphis, which was released in 2012. So a year after the boys were finally released. They speak to a bunch of witnesses, family members, and private investigators that the defense originally hired. And Adam, very quickly, a lot of the light lands firmly on Terry Hobbs.
I bet, yeah.
One of the very first things that comes from talking to his family is Terry's history with violence. He is not a good guy. At one point, he, I believe, shot his brother-in-law, but he's also violent towards Pam and the kids. It's to the point that 2 weeks before Stevie's murder, Stevie told Pam that Terry loves Amanda, but he doesn't love me. And that's a real realization that, you know what, my stepdad's a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
Stevie's aunt says that Amanda, his little sister, had confided in her over the years about Terry sexually abusing her, starting from the age of 4 years old, where she says Terry would digitally penetrate her. She also says that Terry would force Stevie to watch him masturbate, and then that escalated into coercing him to mess with Amanda sexually.
So this whole kind of incestuous thing that he would impose on them.
The documentary also raises very serious questions over Terry's alibi, and that leads Adam to a massive revelation. Remember the night Pam was at work, right? Stevie, of course, didn't come home when he was supposed to, and so he was in deep trouble. Did Terry go looking for him in a rage, find him with the others, and then kill them all? That is the question that people seem to believe potentially happened. It's all speculative. Terry's official alibi in all of this is that he spent the evening looking for Stevie with his best friend, David Jacoby. But while David initially backed up this alibi, when he was deposed, their stories didn't line up on very key details. On top of that, David Jacoby's hair was found near a tree stump near to where the boys were found.
Oh.
At the time, the investigators put this down to secondary transfer, right? But now that Terry's DNA had also been found, David's DNA now seems very relevant in this case as well, right? Both of them are there, and Terry's was caught between one of the knots. I understand finding Terry's DNA, like he's his stepfather, but his stepfather's friend? Question mark?
Yeah.
And the way that Terry's hair was found in that knot, I mean, come on. Also, a neighbor testifies that she saw Terry Hobbs with 3 boys near Robin Hood Hills around about 6:30 p.m. that evening. Now, while police believed that she saw Terry, they think she was mistaken about seeing him with 3 boys.
Right.
And so they discounted that testimony. But she's always, throughout the years, been adamant that she saw Terry with 3 boys.
Interesting. So there were clues, or at least this testament from this woman. There were always things there that actually, if it was a genuine police force that was looking at all avenues, they should have pursued that.
Let me say it like this. If the police had looked at the go-to avenue where you investigate the damn parents or people who know the boys, then they would have gone a lot further. And they didn't. They went for the most outlandish explanation in this case. It's wild. But it goes on, because going back to Pam, she says in hindsight, Terry's behavior following the murders was very off, because the days after the boys were found, she woke up one morning to find Terry doing laundry, which is something he'd never did. And at the time, she thought he was just trying to be helpful given what the family was going through. But she says, looking back with everything we know now, like, was he washing evidence? She also says that Stevie had a penknife that his biological father had given him. She says that this was Stevie's pride and joy. He literally took it everywhere. And she assumed he had it with him the night that he was murdered. And she even begged police to please try and find it because she wanted to keep that little penknife as a keepsake. Years later, she discovers this penknife in Terry Hobbs's nightstand.
Really?
And Terry never once mentioned that he had it, even after knowing how much she wanted it.
Yeah, you just think, whether he did it or not, he sounds like a dick.
And so the West of Memphis documentary basically layers all this stuff about Terry, and it eventually builds into what interviewers and private investigators call the dark family secrets, something that Terry's nephew, Michael Hobbs Jr., says that he's carried with him since he was a kid. And basically he says that sometime after the murder, Terry had come to visit the family. He says that he heard his dad and Terry talking downstairs. Terry was bawling his eyes out and he kept apologizing. And he says that Terry admitted to killing all 3 boys.
Bloody hell.
Michael Jr. had 2 of his friends with him there that day, and they heard it, and they corroborated all this on a polygraph test, which they all passed.
So how old were they then?
So they would have been maybe early teenagers, maybe 13 or 14.
And this would have been, I guess, still relatively recent after the murders.
That's right.
And they've kept it. Why didn't they not do anything about it? I guess they're still young, though, right? Will they be believed? All that sort of stuff, getting worried their parents won't believe them.
The thing is, though, throughout all of the boys' appeals, the West Memphis Three, a lot of this information was building up as part of the subsequent evidence that was collected, right? Like damning stuff that is really worth looking into, right? This judge who kept rejecting all their appeals would have seen a lot of this stuff, and yet he rejected it every single time. And it is hard not to wonder why. And it comes down to the state basically wanting to protect itself. That Alford plea, in effect, was their protection from scrutiny. And the question is there any evidence for this? Well, remember, as I said earlier on, all the evidence that Damien was told was destroyed in a fire? It wasn't. It turned up in 2021. So who was actively trying to hide that and for what reason? You can only wonder whether or not it was the state that was deliberately hiding that to prevent any future appeals from being initiated.
Yeah, well, clearly they could see like the odds were stacking against them with the additional evidence that was being found and being brought up. Yeah, they just didn't see any other way out of this.
Yeah. So you're left with this horrible feeling that the system wasn't just saying no, it was making sure Damien couldn't keep pushing because it likely knew there was enough to force a retrial. One they likely would have won, and the state would have looked like idiots, right?
Yeah, there'd been a lot of people, I guess, in trouble because would some of them have gone to prison, be fined? There'd been a lot. I would have thought there'd been an investigation to the judge, right? So all of this stuff. What did happen then? Because what happened to Terry?
This is the thing. The boys have effectively pleaded guilty. There can be no reopening of the case. And so there will be no one looking into Terry Hobbs's involvement in this case.
But then does that mean Terry's free?
Yep.
Wow. How can you get away with murder like that?
Which brings us to today, because Damien, Jason, and Jessie, they are still fighting for full exoneration. Damien is especially vocal. But He isn't an idiot. He knows the state is ironclad, protected itself with his Alford plea. And so while he may never be exonerated, he is determined to have all that DNA tested, which is why in November 2025, he has requested all those samples from that missing evidence that showed up in 2021 to be properly analyzed forensically using kind of 2026 kind of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And look, this story, like I said, is bigger than what we can cover. There are so many other aspects and angles and side stories that are generally worth their own episode, including a lot of the information around Chris Byers and Michael Moore's fathers. For example, there was a load of controversy around Chris Byers' father having his teeth removed so that a bite sample couldn't be taken of his teeth.
Really?
Yeah, he's a right hillbilly and he does act really weird. He goes on these big rants as well. So a lot of that is covered in the documentaries as well. But of course, to me, it looks like it was Terry Hobbs that is the key suspect here. And I think a lot of people come to believe that it was Terry Hobbs in the end. But at the heart of the story, Adam, is a system that has become more committed to protecting itself than pursuing the truth. But there's also a cultural center to the story. And it's a warning about what happens when you let a moral panic replace forensic fact. And like, we can sit here and go, yeah, but that was the 80s. But panics like this do take hold in modern societies today. Just look at what happened with the whole anti-vax hysteria, like during COVID, right? Look at QAnon and how that birthed the Pizzagate scandal. This story was a panic that created cultural pressure to exploit a vulnerable, mentally disabled teenager to service a story that the country had already been primed to believe for years.
Mm.
And it shows you something very important, that moral panics, they don't just vanish overnight when the headlines move on. If we let them, they linger. And the West Memphis Three happened in the long shadow of the Satanic Panic. Even after it was supposedly put to bed, the fear was still there. It was still steering a lot of decisions. That is a warning that we should be paying attention to. What effect will modern day moral panics like QAnon or the anti-vaxxer movement, or hell, even Jeffrey Epstein, how will they shape kind of how we kind of bring justice in future cases?
Exactly. They linger on for probably a good decade or more afterwards, right?
For sure. And that's exactly what happened. Like with the Satanic Panic, it was 20 years in the making. And we still, I think, are in the shadow. We still have a fear of, for example, male preschool teachers. It's just not a thing. Culturally, it's not a thing. However, when you look at the history between the 50s and the 70s, that was very commonplace, right? It was almost 50-50 split. Now, you'd be lucky if you found 10% of males working as preschool teachers. That is a direct effect of the Satanic Panic and the whole kind of we should take all sexual abuse cases very, very seriously. And it's caused a vilification of men in certain roles.
Yeah, it's almost like people question, why would you want to work with kids? It's adults or teenagers sort of thing. You're right, yeah. I never thought of it like that.
So these things have an effect. And in this case, it sent 3 boys to prison without parole and 1 of them to death row.
I mean, in some ways, it's a good thing that death row can take so long just because of...
Yeah, I don't think he was ever actually given an official date of when he would be executed. But the thing is, though, he's sitting in his cell knowing that that could come any day.
Yeah.
And Adam, that is the story of the West Memphis Three.
That is... I can see why it was, people are so fascinated because I just don't understand how that even happened. I mean, I can, based on some of the other stories we've covered, but I'm angry that the killer is still out there.
Yeah, me too.
Whoever he might be, allegedly, whatever.
When I was looking at some aerial footage of Robin Hood Hills, like I said, they're on a main road and across the road is a truck stop, massive truck stop. I wonder whether or not it was just someone passing by. Someone who's parked up for the night, went into those woods, found these 3 boys and murdered them, and then he was off. I think that's possible.
I guess we'll never know unless a case can be opened or reopened against this. But if we're saying that's not possible...
No, not with the Alford plea in place.
Well, you know what? That was a rule that someone put in place. Surely someone can put in place a new rule.
Sure, of course. Rules are there to be changed, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Adam, fancy doing some member shout-outs?
Let's do it.
As you guys know, HR have been hard at work assigning the ideal roles for our certified freaks and big top tier members. The only problem is...
we don't actually know what your job entails.
So when you hear your name, take note of your job title, the one that we say, and then using the link in the show notes, submit your official job description to HR.
Yeah, we want to know what your duties involve,
Duties.
who you report to, and any major incidents that have happened under your watch.
They also want to know how you guys are tracking against your KPIs, and we will read some of the best job descriptions in a future episode.
Okay, so this week, a very big welcome to Carly, our lead coordinator of mildly concerning animal shenanigans. We work very closely together.
Yeah. We have Taylor Rose, our trapeze grip powder allocation overseer.
Ingrid B., our nighttime shadow puppet authenticity auditor.
Nice. Heather Duncan, our senior cloud to tent static electricity risk forecaster.
I don't even know what that means.
I think Heather knows what it means.
She will, yeah. Ishan Vajpayee, our ringmaster hat tilt angle enforcement lead.
Yeah, she works for me.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And we have Becca, our compliance monitor of excessive clown confidence.
Okay, too much clowning around.
Yeah.
She'll be in touch.
And this week's best job description is from Rebecca McIntyre. She is known as Avery Well, a self-appointed circus breeze analyst.
Okay. So she says she is responsible for assigning blame to moving air and pointing confidently at nothing during moments of crisis.
Nice.
Her experience includes arguing with gusts, weaponizing drafts for dramatic timing, releasing scarves to distract from non-offense, release the scarves, and stopping a breeze once by sheer denial it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. Very good. Skills include advanced breeze gaslighting, cape inflation theory, and finger to the air analytics and professional shrugging. And her references are unavailable due to atmospheric conditions.
Key performance indicators include audience gasps per minute, number of secrets not discovered, successful breezes that feel natural, and incidents where someone says, weird, and then forgets why.
Yes. Very good.
And a reminder, if you're a certified freak or a big top member and you didn't hear your job title this time, don't panic. Your role exists somewhere in Sue's filing cabinet, and we'll read more of them in a future episode. But if you want yours now, message us on Patreon or Instagram and we'll dig it out so you can get cracking on your job description.
Very good. I really enjoyed that one today.
Very good, yeah.
Right, shall we run the outro for this week, Adam?
Let's do it.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the compendium.
And if today's episode has sparked your curiosity, then please do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast app. It truly makes a world of difference and helps more people like you discover the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget that next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon, and as always, is completely free to access.
And if that is not enough for you, and you want even more,
yes,
then join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock the entire archive. You get to delve into exclusive content and get a sneak peek at what's coming next.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday, and until then, remember, Robin Hood Heels did not just take these three boys. It exposed what a panic can do to justice. We'll see you next time.
See ya.